Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, riding solo on this fine, Thursday night as we prepare for the weekend ahead. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about a piece that I wrote for Clutch Points, my most recent piece for Clutch Points, in which I outlined the Lakers' options heading into or while they wait for Jaxson Hayes and Christian Wood to get healthy. Both are at least a week or so away from being available. Wood appears to be further out than that week or so. He's he's considered indefinite. So we'll see if or when he gets onto the court again. But your options right now as it stand are just Christian Koloko, and Lakers fans, I would imagine, feel a little uneasy about that. So I went ahead and outlined what options the Lakers could have or what they've run into in their search for a different options at the backup center spot. A quick reminder before we dive in. I'll also, on the back half of the show, I'll preview Friday night's game against the San Antonio Spurs, who happen to have a pretty good center in Victor Wembanyama. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then if you guys have any questions as we head into the weekend, you guys can hit me with those in the live comments as well. Quick reminder, please do hit subscribe if you guys are watching here live on YouTube. If you guys are watching on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@Lakers Lounge is where you can find the show there. If you guys are listening in the morning to the podcast version of all of this, go ahead and hit subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast, preferably on Odyssey, and tell your friends about the show. Tell your friends that you love the show. Tell your enemies that you hate it. Hit that like button and hit that rate and review and then unreview and rate it again and review it again and all of that good stuff. Let's keep this thing growing in the way that it has. It's been really fun here at the beginning of the season to watch this thing grow, and let's keep that momentum going forward. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the options that the Lakers have, whether that be on the trade market, the free agent market, things that the Lakers could do if they got creative with their own roster to be able to give themselves some extra flexibility. All of that good stuff right now. All right. So first and foremost, a quick reminder on what happened here, right? Christian Wood got surgery late in the summer, kind of surprised the Lakers by getting that surgery. And then the season starts and you're going into it without Christian Wood. So it's like, well, Jaxson, you got this, bud. And then apparently in practice, some kind of, drill off to the side, Jaxson, I don't know if he landed on a coach's foot or whatever, but they said it was just like freak accident that was a non-contact kind of a thing with Jaxson, and he goes down and is now out for the next week or two, or they're going to evaluate him in a week or two, meaning he could miss even more time than that. And, if you base things on how things have gone with their training staff recently, Jaxson Hayes might be dead. So, you have that going for you. That leaves Christian Koloko, who before this season hadn't played NBA basketball since 2023. They did have Colin Castleton for a little bit, but they let him go to be able to sign Koloko. And they wound up keeping, obviously, Quincy Olivari, who actually so I take that back. They waived Blake Hinson to sign Christian Koloko, and then they kept Koloko over Castleton when they wanted to open a two-way spot for Quincy Olivari, who obviously was the bright spot in this year's preseason. They do have Armel Traore, who's like a power forward who could technically play really small ball 5, even though he doesn't really like doing that much, it doesn't appear. Had they kept Castleton instead of Traore, they would have 2 options there behind Anthony Davis still on their two-way rosters, but it doesn't, that's a decision that they made. Castleton is in Memphis's organization right now, which means in a couple of years or so, he's going to be reverse dunking all over the Lakers, as we have seen from Jay Huff the last couple times that the Lakers played Memphis. So, this was something that needed to be addressed back in the summer. This is it was already a very thin roster as it was. And we've gone over this plenty, but rather than, AD was being pretty clear by way of leaks and in the stuff he was saying to the Lakers, I'm told, that like, I don't want to play as much center as I played last year. And the Lakers were like, we hear you, AD. We just don't care. And they didn't wind up doing anything to bring in a center that could viably play next to Anthony Davis, or just anchor lineups better when AD is on the bench or hurt or whatever. So, this is, I think, my top criticism of Pelinka is how okay he is with going into the season with glaring needs on the roster. And his thinking is that he'll just address those things at some point in the regular season. Sometimes he does, right? Eventually he did trade Russell Westbrook, but remember the year before that, he entered, they traded for Russ in the summer of 21. It's all kind of a blur now. They trade for Russ. It clearly isn't working. They decide not to do anything at the deadline. And then that following summer, they decide to not do anything then either, thinking that they would eventually, rip that Band-Aid off at that following deadline, which again, they did. That needs to be pointed out, but it is one of those things where it's like, you didn't have to wait months into the season to where by the time the Lakers did make that trade, they basically had to play perfect basketball. And it did get them into the play-in and eventually got them into the playoffs and eventually got to the Western Conference Finals. But it took quite some time to figure that out. And the Lakers were just kind of stuck in limbo, and those guys on the roster were just kind of looking around like, this isn't working. And that's, I think, where things stand now, where, no disrespect to Christian Koloko, but I do think people are kind of looking around internally, or players in that locker room are kind of looking around like, this is it, huh? Okay. You got this, Christian. No, not you, Wood. You're still hurt. You got this, Koloko. Getting to this point here is yet another kind of ugly look in the Pelinka tenure. And we'll see what he does here to address this, as the Lakers are just really, if Koloko gets hurt, you're kind of screwed. And then if like AD got into foul trouble against Memphis, and it was a good thing that Koloko played the way that he did, and LeBron played the way that he did. Dalton went on that crazy run at the end of the third. They got the Lakers back into the game. But there's just zero margin for error right now. And that is no way to try to get through an 82 game season. What I have heard, though, is that and this isn't like out of the norm, right? But the Lakers have been in contact with teams throughout the league about potential targets and doing their due diligence to check in and see what's the deal there. And the teams that they have had the most conversations with, I would say Utah is probably at the top of the list. I would say Portland is probably next, as they've been checking in on the Jeremy Grant situation. And now with Portland, they have like one too many centers because they drafted Klingon and they have DeAndre Ayton, and then they also have Robert Williams. And those three guys, you can maybe play two of them side by side, and they have for a little bit this season, but you obviously can't play all three of them. So I think eventually they'll probably look to move one of those guys. And the Lakers have checked in on Robert Williams, but are pretty dubious about his medical history. So, like what I say, so they've talked to Utah about Walker Kessler. They've talked to Portland about Robert Williams, and other guys on that roster. They have, looking at the piece now, they have, where is it? This is not it. No. I'm pulled up the wrong piece. So I'll find the right piece here in a second. Yeah, here we go. So the guys that the Lakers have called about, they've called Indiana about Miles Turner, but we're quickly told like, no, we're gonna continue to ride this out. Remember, Indiana was just in the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago. The East is somehow even worse than it was last year as a conference. So Indiana is saying like, even if they got off to like not the blazing start that they had maybe hoped about, but they're like, well, we still think we could at least beat a couple of these teams in some playoff rounds and at the very least, get to the semis or the Eastern Conference Finals again. And to some organizations that's enough. And then Miles Turner is a free agent at the end of this year, but the indications I've gotten around the league is that like Indiana is pretty confident that they could either come to an agreement with Turner at some point this upcoming summer, or worst comes to worst, they could get something in return for him if it does look like he's getting ready to go. But you wouldn't do anything like that until way later in the season. We're talking like midnight of the trade deadline basically is when I would anticipate any such kind of decision would be made with Miles Turner. You have Nikola Vucevic in Chicago, who is actually playing really well offensively. Don't ask me about his defense. But he is 20 and 10 basically averages so far this season on really efficient shooting splits. He is eventually going to come back down to earth. And yeah, like I think the Lakers would be interested in what he and AD could do together offensively, because Vooch is hitting threes pretty well this season. But the problem that you run into is like he is just really bad defensively. And the Lakers defense is already pretty bad as it is, and they need to start addressing that defense if they want to be a serious even play-in contender. They can't play the kind of defense that they've played so far this season, and Vooch does not help in that regard at all. I should have mentioned Nick Richards from Charlotte, and I left him out of the piece, partially because I've written about him before, but also partially because Charlotte is still in that kind of limbo that you can sometimes find yourself, where, well, we're kind of competitive. Like that's kind of fun. And again, one of the real issues that you sometimes run into in the NBA and in professional sports in general is not everybody is always really pushing themselves to win a championship. For Charlotte, if they get into the play-in, or if they somehow get out of the play-in and get to play a playoff round, that would be a successful season for Charlotte. And if they think that Richards could maybe help them do that, then that complicates the Lakers' interest in him. So you also have that. And then I know a lot of people have been asking about Jonas, and that Jonas Valanciunas, that is, of the Washington Wizards. Yeah, he is a target. He is somebody who the Lakers wanted back in the summer. He wound up signing while the Lakers were waiting for Klay Thompson to make his decision. And now, as a result, if the Lakers do want Valanciunas, they'll have to give up some matching salary, and or you know, I would imagine it would be a pretty conditional second round pick that they would have to send out. Um, I would say the Lakers probably are able to move him for like, or get him for like Gabe and that second round draft capital. And then at that point they would, look to move Wood and or Hayes, probably one of them, off somewhere else, because there's no point in having four centers at that point on your roster. I would probably say they move Wood in that case, because there's a lot of overlap between him and Valanciunas. Whereas with Hayes, like, he's that kind of spark plug athletic big that would be a change of speed type of option, for the Lakers. So I would say probably they move one of those guys, probably Wood, and it would again probably be waving him outright, or moving him to a team that has a little bit of draft or cap space still left over. And then you would, of all of the names that I've said so far, I would probably say Valanciunas is the likeliest. The thing with him, though, is that, like, he can't be moved until December 15th, and I'm recording this on November 14th. You guys are going to be listening to this in podcast form on November 15th, which means you have to make it a month before that point. And normally, like, the earlier you trade for somebody in the season, the higher price you typically are going to have to pay. And because normally if you're trading for somebody earlier in the season, there's a bit of desperation that comes with the move. And if the Lakers do trade for Jonas right on December 15th, it would be because, like, something really, really bad happened and they just got to get a big there somehow, some way. And they aren't there right now. We'll talk here in a second about, like, internal options, and the reality of the situation. But the Lakers right now, I'm told, are not anywhere near desperate enough to, like, wait until 11:59 of December 14th to call up Washington and be like, please take this deal, give us Jonas Valanciunas. It's just not that kind of a situation. Now, the other option that the Lakers could pursue here, the other path that they could head down, is they have a whole bunch of contracts handed out to players who are not really NBA players right now. You have Maxwell Lewis on an NBA deal. You have Bronny James on an NBA deal. You obviously have Christian Wood, who I don't know if he's going to play this year. You know, you can go down the line. Cam is actually turned out to be pretty good. It is November, and he's playing really well so far. So the Lakers aren't going to open up a roster spot by moving him. But what I was, essentially asking around about is, well, what if you send one of these minimum contracts or rookie scale contracts? Remember, the Lakers just made Jalen Hood-Schifino an expiring contract too. Right now, the Lakers are right up against the second apron, and they do not want to exceed. They are under strict walking orders. You are not to exceed the second apron, period. Unless you're, somehow, some way bringing in Giannis, then okay, maybe we can talk about, like, how far above the second apron that you want to go. But for a Jonas Valanciunas or for a backup center, the Lakers are not going to go above the second apron, which applies in this situation. It's relevant in this situation because, again, they're right up against that second apron. So, like, even if they basically said, screw it, we're done waiting for you, Maxwell Lewis, get out of here, and they waived him outright, that would open up a roster spot, but they wouldn't have enough money to sign a player without going into the second apron. The other thing too is that like the free agents that are available out there. I know Dwight Howard is basically begging any team that has any injury whatsoever to please give him a shot. JaVale McGee is, I guess, out there somewhere as well. Most of the NBA ready talent, unfortunately for the Lakers, resides in guard positions. Talking about Lonnie Walker, we're talking about Markelle Fultz, and so on and so forth. So there isn't anybody out there that the Lakers would want to sign for the rest of the season. You have to wait till like January to sign 10-day contracts. So if and at that point in the season, maybe that would be something like if we were in January right now, maybe that would be something the Lakers would do is move one of these end of roster NBA contracts into say like Detroit's cap space. They would probably waive them right away anyway. They would attach like some conditional second round pick just to help free up that roster spot. And then if we were in January, maybe the Lakers would offer a 10-day to Dwight, or they would offer a 10-day to a Boogie or to a JaVale if those guys are still considered in good enough shape to play. And I don't know if Damian Jones is out there somewhere. My large adult son, maybe just maybe he'll turn things around. But yeah, if you're thinking, well, why don't they just open up a roster spot? It's not as simple as just waiving somebody. So they would have to make a trade at the end of the roster. And Rob doesn't like attaching draft capital just to get rid of his mistakes. So the chances are that is not really an option right now. And again, the Lakers don't consider themselves so desperate that they would feel the need to do that right now. Maybe things change if like Koloko gets hurt or if AD gets hurt, or you guys can see it there on the right side. If Hayes's domestic violence case that was reopened by the league, if there's some kind of development there, maybe the Lakers decide at that point that they need to find more permanent help or something like that. But as it stands right now, in terms of trade targets and in terms of free agency, this is the roster. And it's just like I've been saying since the end of last summer. And I know people hated the fact that I was saying this and hated the fact it was even worse that I wound up being right. But this is the Lakers roster. This is what they internally are comfortable with. And until further notice or until some development that would indicate to them that they shouldn't be as confident, this is just the situation. I will say though that the Lakers really like Koloko. Right when he signed, there was a lot of like, I wouldn't go so far as to call it unbridled joy, but I would say that like a lot of people in the organization were pretty stoked that they were able to get somebody who, yes, hasn't played in a couple of years, but the last time we saw him was an actual NBA player. You couldn't say that about Colin Castleton. Maybe had the Lakers been a little bit more in sync as far as their parent team and the G League team, maybe Jay Huff would have been that guy, and he would be an actual, because he is. He definitely looks like an NBA player for sure. They just never really gave him a chance. And in this case, the Lakers, out of necessity, are giving Koloko a chance, and they might wind up better for it, right? Like last year, if we continue with the Memphis Grizzlies as an example, last year the Grizzlies had so many injuries, and it was the season from hell in such a way that it was just like, well, we got to get warm bodies on the court, and we may as well try out some young players to see what they're capable of. And eventually Scottie Pippen Jr. gets into the rotation, Jay Huff gets into the rotation, and the Grizzlies, they also had Gigi Jaxson last year, who got some minutes and really made the most out of his opportunity then too. They almost accidentally bolstered their rotation with a bunch of youth that they're using to this day. So, in this case, maybe Koloko doesn't get a look because of that disconnect between the parent team and the South Bay Lakers. In this case, he is getting that look. He is getting that opportunity. He's looked fine. Like I haven't watched him and said like, yeah, the Lakers definitely need to go out and get somebody right now. I think he's been fine. I don't hold it against the Lakers for being optimistic about him. But if we do find out that like Hayes is going to be out longer than initially considered, or Wood is just not going to come back, or again, I'll talk about it here in a second. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but if Hayes' domestic violence case comes back and maybe they lose him through that process too, like maybe then the situation becomes more dire and you need more help beyond Koloko, but it's just not right. It's not there right now. He's been fine. I do want to say, as far as Hayes's case, the I talked about it on a show previously, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it now. He shouldn't have been a Laker in the first place, is my stance right now. But as he was one, the Lakers now have to deal with this, or now have to wait on the league's ruling on this. And whatever it is that they're investigating, apparently they didn't even talk to the victim the first time through their investigation. Mike Bass, the NBA spokesperson, did say that the NBA did reach out to the victim. She denies that adamantly now, and I tend to blame victims, and I tend to believe victims. Real bad error there. I was going to say I tend to blame these leagues for carrying out sham investigations, and like if the league decides to make an example out of Hayes by way of saying we didn't, it's not double jeopardy, we didn't punish him in the first place, or if they basically say that Hayes lied to them about what happened that night, even though he pled no contest to actual charges. If the league does decide to come down harder now on Hayes than they did initially, which is an impossible bar not to clear because they didn't do anything at all in the first place, then maybe, because of the headache, because of the video, maybe the Lakers even cut ties with Hayes. I'm just told like that doesn't seem very likely at all. It's a non-zero chance that Hayes played his last game as a Laker because of this injury and because of the case and the investigation that was reopened for it. But it would certainly shock a lot of people if the Lakers had to make that kind of a call on Hayes right now. But it is the kind of thing that we still need to mention, though, because it is this thing that we're waiting to hear more about whenever the league carries out its second sham investigation. All right. I'm going to go into, we do have a star comment. Yeah. The BC. Wow. Just like a terrible typo, like mental typo there on my part. Good God. Like the opposite of what I meant to say there. But yeah, I'm going to go through here the comments here that that I missed or whatever. While I was rambling, we do have one from Brandon Omeng, which means I get to play this bad boy. Brandon Omeng writes, Max needs Gabe's minutes. Gabe is 6'1", Max is 6'5". Max rebounds and defends. I'm probably just about there, especially with you when you're bringing D'Lo off of the bench. You don't really need Gabe's on-ball ability. I like, you have Austin and LeBron in the first unit, and then you have D'Lo in the second unit, and then some combination of D'Lo, Austin, and LeBron for those starter and bench combination units. You don't really need Gabe's on-ball ability. Yes, he's probably their best on, point of attack defender, but Cam has been fine there. And I don't know if it's such a crazy difference between him and Max in that regard. Gabe can't throw a pea in the ocean right now either. So it's not like you're missing his shooting if you bench him altogether. There is some kind of whispers out there that maybe the Lakers are continuing to play Gabe, so that his trade uh, value doesn't completely collapse. The only thing is there, like, the longer you play him, the larger the sample size gets, and maybe Gabe just sucks now, and no team is going to trade for like a player who isn't very good potentially, who has a contract that goes into next season too. So, yeah, I'm with you, Brandon. I personally would probably give Max. First and foremost, Dalton needs more minutes. Second, after that, like I would probably play Connect, or I would probably play Max with whatever minutes that's left over from the minutes that you gave Dalton at the cost of Gabe minutes. So, yeah, I'm with you 100% there, and it's probably a pretty popular stance at this point. All right, I think that is. Oh no, I'm gonna preview the game tomorrow. So the tonight. By the time you guys are listening to this in the morning, the Lakers play in San Antonio. They have really struggled on the road so far this year. They are facing off against a Victor Wembanyama who is on absolute fire. Just dropped 50 plus in his most recent game. The Spurs are still trying to lose a lot, so you have that going for you, but there is enough talent there on that Spurs team that you know they can win in spite of what the front office wants from them. The other thing too is I think the thing that helps the Lakers. So Lakers have been abysmal in transition defense this year, on transition defense this year. Chris Paul has completely slowed down the 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 Spurs from any kind of running game whatsoever, which plays really heavily into the Lakers' favor here. Um, the Spurs, also quick shout out, probably should have started with this. Spurs are not going to have Greg Popovich on the sideline. He, according to the Spurs, had a mild stroke, which again, it feels like an oxymoron, mild stroke. I actually had a TIA when I was in high school, because I was like squatting and the bar, like, pinched a nerve and something happened in my head. And it's just like, even that was considered a mild stroke. Freaked the hell out of my mom. So, yeah, prayers up to Pop's family and to the entire Spurs family and to everybody around that situation. But, I would say if Pop was still there, he would probably tell Chris Paul to speed it up a little bit against this Lakers team that has been as bad as it's been in transition on defense. So, yeah, I think the Lakers have the upper hand here. I don't know if I would go so far as to pick them to win. I would say it's probably a coin flip because of how bad the Lakers have been on the road, but it is a game that the Lakers need. And I do get the sense that like LeBron has really picked it up in those games that he recognizes the Lakers need. And this would be another one of them. Looking for a bounce back game from AD too. He didn't look very good for most of the last game. He did say he started to get a little more used to the lighting, because of his the state of his eye as the game went on. Hopefully, now that he has that behind him or under his belt, he won't look as kind of lost as he did at the onset of the game. The Lakers need him in this matchup against Wemby. It's going to be a really fun matchup. I'm actually going to be in the building. The Lakers and the Spurs gave me a road credential, so I'll be driving down to San Antonio tomorrow to cover that game. And I'll have some video that I'll post here in the lounge after or as that game is going on. So looking forward to be able to give you some of that too. So until then, there will not be a post game show tomorrow because it's a Friday and because I will be in San Antonio. So until Sunday, when we're back here, get those questions in the form of a 5-star review on iTunes. Shouts to everybody who tuned in tonight. Please hit that subscribe button and the like button and all of that good stuff. Yeah, until Sunday, have a great rest of your weekend. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you then. Have a good one, everybody. I am in Austin, Texas, BC.